Hey, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Professor.
Yeah, hi, how are you? Um, all right, I see 10 people here. We're, let's see, right before I joined the Collaborate, there were like 11 people in the, 11 people in the today's forum. Let me just go back and quickly check. Maybe. All right, I see 11, right? 11. Um, so basically one more person. I'm just, still missing one person. But, of course, um, this is just half the people on the roster. Need I need you guys to be more prompt because by now I should see like 24 people, but I see only 10, and number isn't increasing that quickly. Well, so um, the I believe um, you guys have all done the first the ROI concept check, right? Uh, you can no longer do it because the due date is passed, but you can check. It will still be visible until tomorrow, so you can go back and check um, what you got wrong. And uh, if ever, if you have any questions about it, you can ask. But um, anyway, so I need to go back to. So that's 11. Yeah. So where's the rest of the class? Huh? So there's one person. Yeah, Renisha, right? Renisha, good afternoon. Um, all righty. Tia. So in our last class, right, we were talking about uh, the classifications of interest rates, how we classify the interest rates, and we were just in the middle of comparing the compound interest rate and simple interest rate. Uh, I just finished, I remember, you can go back to uh, the recording of the live session because it is updated after every class, and uh, from that I can tell I finished, explaining everything about uh, the compound interest rate, and we've done that already from uh, the return on investment, right? I explained already what compounding is and how it, the whole concept of compounding was already explained in the example of ROI. Now, so then, what is the simple interest rate? Uh, as I said, compound interest rate is for the long-term financial market, or called, namely, capital market, whereas the simple interest rate is used in the short-term financial market, namely, money market. Short-term financial market means, money market means, lending or borrowing money uh, within, um, you know, with the maturity under 1 year. So generally, like 30, lending money for 30 days, 60 days, like 90 days, in that case, the way the interest rate accrues um, will be, uh, simply by, for example, if it is future value 2, it will be principal times 1 plus RT. So in other words, it's not raised to power, right? It's not raised to power, it's not compounded. It's rather, right? Simply, so in our example, if P is 10K, and if interest rate is 10%, if time is 2 years, right? We know we're working with this assumption, right? Principal is 10K, interest rate 10%, time 2 years, right? Of course, first of all, this is not appropriate, because 2 years is already long term, right? As I said, simple interest rate is used for short term financial market or money market. Then in the case that something like maturity like 2 years, it cannot exist. But for an example, just to make the example simple, let's assume we are using simple interest rate for even long-term financial market. And in this case, because this is 0.2, right? So it's simply simply 10K times 1.2, so it's going to be 12K. So think about it. Compared with compound interest rate, and definitely compound interest rate is better, because if it is by compounding, right? We know then it's going to be if this is 10K, then times 1.1 squared, right? And we know it's going to be 12.1K, right? So clearly, compounding is preferred. I mean, the longer the maturity, right? Clearly, the compounding wins out, right? In other words, future value by compounding is far better. So that's why they don't use simple interest rate in the money market, in the capital market. The simple interest rate is used only in the money market. So in reality, T is time is always something less than a year. Right? So something like 60 days. Right? Then how do we find the future value? So in other words, in 60 days, right? In this case. So I wouldn't put 60 here, because then it can cause confusion. It can mean if I do it like this, it's like it can mean future value in 60 years. So I won't use that time subscript here. I'll just, then it's 10K, right? 10K times 1 plus. Okay, in 60 days, right? $60 days, right? Think about it. Is if you convert 60 days into year, right? It's not a full year, but it's clearly, we know it's a fraction of a year, right? So 1 year, of course, everyone knows 1 year is 365 days, 365 days, but there are ordinarily they use 360 days, right? Ordinarily they use 360 days. You can use also 365, but that is not ordinary case. That would be that will be called exact year. But ordinary. So ordinary year is 360 days. Exact year 365 days. So as the word ordinary means, that's what is commonly used. That's what is used ordinarily. So unless specifically exact year is required, by default, use ordinary years. So by this way, think about it. All the interest rates think about it. Why do we have to make that adjustment? Because interest rate means, basically annual rate, APR, right? Remember, all rates must be expressed as annual on annual basis, right? All rates must be expressed on annual basis. That's why we found annualized return, right? So interest rates are basically annual percentage rate, right? So if 10% is per year, then for 60 days, we must convert days into year. Then, by using ordinary interest year, right? By using ordinary year, right? By then that way we are basically converting days into year or adjusting, 60 days into a fraction of year. And if you do it, that's basically how the simple interest rate is used, right? That's what simple interest rate is. So everybody's okay with that? Everyone? I have 12 people now.
Yes.
Yeah, good, good. So one person said yes, and the rest of the class. Any questions? It should be a piece of cake. It's not a big deal. So that's, basically what, simple interest rate is. And then interest rate can be, this is very important. Interest rate can be classified as also as nominal interest rate and real interest rate. And real means, always what real means is, after adjusting for inflation. Now think about it. when they say our interest rate is 10%, right? That's called nominal rate. That's nominal. That's, in other words, let me use this notation. I stands for interest rate, right? Of course, I stands for interest rate. And that is, it is nominal interest rate. Nominal means, in name, literally, so it's also called the stated or quoted interest rate. Okay, and let's say, so nominal interest rate is 10%. So that means 1 year later, of course, we know you're gonna, if your principal is 10K, you're gonna have 11K 1 year later, right? $11K 1 year later. That's the future value 1, right? But then suppose, there has been 10% inflation as well. So that Greek character pi, it means inflation in macroeconomic context, right? In macroeconomic context, it's this, used as the symbol for inflation. But in microeconomics context, it's the symbol for profit. So let's say, and of course, how do I know if it is macroeconomics context or microeconomic context? Look, if it is microeconomics context, it's profit. So profit you cannot, you wouldn't express profit in percentage. When you say profit is always, dollars, in dollars. So when you say profit, so if it is, percentage, then that's, inflation. So then think about it. If inflation is 10%, that means everything is 10% more expensive, right? On average, everything is 10% more expensive. So that means, let's say price of Coke, right, at time 0. Let's say you can buy Coke from the vending machine for $1, right? The Coke is $1 at time 0, meaning, last year, Coke was, $1 from the vending machine. Now, 1 year later, if there has been 10% inflation, what should be the price of Coke 1 year later? Anyone?
$11.
What did you say?
I said
Come again?
$11.
11? Why?
Sorry. Sorry. 1.1.
Yeah, 1.1.
Sorry.
Okay. No problem. $1.10. And who was this?
Mukhtar.
Mukhtar. Okay, Mukhtar. So you got 0.5. So I'm not asking any hard questions. It's just, so this is section 1401. Today is 0214. And yeah, Mukhtar. Okay, you got 0.5. Yeah, everything is, 10% more expensive. So clearly, the price of Coke price of Coke should be $1.10, right? But then think about it. With 11K, nominally it is 11K. Last year, with 10K, right? At time zero, last year, right? With 10K, how many bottles of Coke could you buy with 10K? Anyone?
If the price was at $1?
Yeah, last year the price was $1. Huh?
You could
Say
buy
that again?
10,000.
Did you say 10,000?
Yeah, you could buy 10,000 of them if it's
Yeah.
$1.
Yeah. Yes, of course. 10,000. Yes. You could buy 10,000 bottles. This year, everything is. How many bottles can you buy this year? This year you have 11K, right? 1 year later, right? You have 11K because you got the interest rate was 10%. How many bottles of Coke can you buy?
You could buy 11,000 now.
No. You have $11,000 this year. What's the price of Coke?
$1.10.
Yes. Price of Coke is $1.10 this year. So with this year you have 11K because the bank paid 10% interest. So you have 11K. With 11K, how many bottles of Coke can you buy?
10,000?
Yeah, still 10,000. Who said that?
Maria Cervantes?
Maria. Okay, Maria. There must be only one Maria. Right? Maria Cervantes. Okay. Maria. Yeah, you got 0.5. Now, yeah, it's not a tough question, because a bottle of Coke is $1.10 this year. With 11K, you can still buy. I mean, you cannot buy 11,000 bottles. You can buy only 10,000 bottles, right? Because 11K divided by $1.10, right? So that gives you, 10,000 bottles. Jesus, I hate this. So what do you see from here? This is why this 11K is called nominal dollars, right? Nominal, only in name, but in real terms, effectively, real terms. In real terms, that means in real goods. In real goods, how many can you buy? 10K, of course, 10K bottles, 10,000 bottles, right? And why? 11K isn't, if there was no inflation, right? If there was no inflation, you would buy 11,000 bottles of Coke, right? You could buy 11,000 bottles of Coke if there was no inflation. But because inflation made everything 10% more expensive, inflation eroded the purchasing power of dollars by 10%. So in real goods, you can buy only just 10K, which is the same as last year, right? Which is the same thing as last year. That's why it is called real, right? Real means adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation. That's what real means. So that brings us to the next concept. So think about it. If $11,000 cannot buy 11,000 bottles of Coke, but only 10,000 bottles, you are no better off than last year, even with $11,000, right? Those $11,000 are only $11,000 in nominal value, in nominal terms, but in real terms, the purchasing power of $11,000 is just as much as $10,000 last year. So effectively, because the inflation has eroded the purchasing power of that 10% nominal interest rate. You effectively, your real interest rate is zero, right? Does that make sense? So real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus, or what's another way of saying that? Minus inflation, or minus is, in colloquial language. I mean, if you don't like to say minus, that's what it adjusted for. That's what it means, adjusted for inflation, right? You should be able to translate math into everyday language, and not everything is possible. Not everything is possible to translate into everyday language, but at least this is nothing difficult. Anybody anybody with average intelligence can easily interpret it this way. That's what adjusting. That's what adjustment means, right? That's what this expression adjusted. But that's not real interest rate is nominal interest rate adjusted for inflation, right? So this is a very important concept. Why? When we say everybody's crying out inflation these days, because inflation is last January, as of January, right? Year-on-year inflation, right? Year-on-year inflation. January, right, was like 7.5%, right? So in other words, between January 2021 and January this year, 2022, the inflation has been 7.5%, right? So people are crying out inflation. That's high inflation, basically, and it's 40-year high, right? 40-year. Within the last 40 years, this was the highest inflation ever. 40 years means, 40 years ago, that was, 1982. Look, in 1982, actually, inflation was subdued. But, prior to 82, like, 1979, inflation was, like above 10%, right? That was very high inflation. But we can think of two things. First, nobody will cry out inflation if the interest rate is greater than if the interest rate is greater than inflation. Let's think about it. There are three possibilities for interest rate and inflation. First of all, it can be greater than inflation. In other words, interest rate can be greater than inflation, right? That's the first possibility. Second one, interest rate can be equal to, interest rate can be, what am I doing? what I'm saying is nominal interest rate, nominal rate. Nominal interest rate can be, did I use purple? Nominal interest rate can be greater than, and then inflation, nominal interest rate being equal to inflation, and then nominal interest rate less than inflation. Now think about it. If this is the case, then real interest rate would be positive. Isn't that right? It will be greater than, it will be positive. If this is the case, real interest rate will be 0. If this is the case, real interest rate would be negative. Right? It's just a straightforward mathematical fact. So this is the example we just took a look at, right? 10%, both of them, 10%, 10%. Then the real interest rate will be 0. So if you put the money in the bank, although the bank pays you 10% interest, effectively, there is no interest. It's like you got no interest because $11,000 cannot buy what $11,000 could buy last year. It can only buy as much as what 10,000 could buy last year. So you're no better off, right? It's just nominally 11,000, but effectively it's just like $10,000 last year. So if real interest rate is 0, if on the other hand, if interest rate is nominal rate is 15%, inflation is 10%, yeah, then real interest rate is still real interest rate is positive. It's 5%. Real interest rate is 5%, right? So you're still better off. You're better off than last year because nominally your interest rate is 15%, but still in real terms you cannot buy 15% more. Well, you can still buy 5% more. Okay, nobody will cry out inflation in such a case. I mean, they will notice that things are more expensive, but you can still do better, right? From your investment, right? I mean, as I said, if you put your money in the bank, that's a kind of passive investing, right? Passive investing, and if that putting your money in the bank gives you a 2% return, right? That's still a return on investment, return on your money. You're 5% better off than last year, right? And if this is the case, that means inflation is 10%, but nominal interest rate is 5%. Now, in this case, what is your real interest rate? Anyone? What is your real interest rate?
-5.
-5. And who is this?
Mukhtar.
Mukhtar again. Mukhtar, you got another 0.5. I almost forgot. There was someone who said, when I asked, to my question, when I asked how many bottles of Coke can you buy, with $10,000 last year, how many bottles of Coke can you buy a bottle of Coke was $1 last? When I asked that question, there was a young lady who said 10,000 bottles. And who was that?
Was me, Maria.
Maria. Oh, that was Maria. You said you gave me the answer to the second question. In other words, when you have $11,000 and with 10% inflation, price 1 year later is $1.10. And how many bottles can you buy? And you gave me, 10,000. But before you, was it still before you to the question, with $10,000 last year, with a dollar price with price being $1, how many bottles of Coke? I mean, to that question, was it also you?
It was
I
Tia.
think it was Tia.
Tia,
Yes, it was
okay.
Tia.
Okay, Tia. So for that, Tia, you get 0.52. Okay. Yeah, because I can't see, because when I'm on another app, I cannot see this, so I cannot tell. But I could tell it was the voice was different, right? I knew it was a different person. All right, so yeah. So back to our in this case, right? When inflation is greater than nominal interest rate, then real interest rate will be negative. And this is so negative real interest rate. Negative interest rate sounds very bad. First of all, when you say negative interest rate, generally it means negative nominal interest rate. Negative nominal interest rate. But can there be negative nominal interest rate? Think about it. Can there be negative nominal interest rate? What does negative nominal interest rate mean? That means, if I put my money in the bank, right, instead of me getting the interest from the bank, I will be paying interest to the bank. That's negative interest rate. Isn't that right? Don't you think? Interest rate is what the borrower pays the lender. And when I put my money in the bank, I'm the lender, right? And the bank is the borrower. And this is happening passively. I'm becoming passively a lender, and bank is passively becoming a borrower. So the borrower must pay interest, but if the interest rate is negative, the lender pays the interest. And you probably cannot even imagine that. How can, but that is the meaning of negative interest. And in reality, so negative interest rate, negative nominal interest rate, it was used occasionally, and in some rare occasion. And the reason for that is to encourage or that means, think about it. That's to discourage keeping your money in the bank, to discourage keeping your money in the bank, right? And you might wonder, why would then banks, why would they want to discourage you to keep money? If the economy is depressed and people just keep their money in the bank, right? The money and the banking sector cannot efficiently and effectively invest that money, then keeping money in the bank is only costing the bank, and it's not helping because the bank has to pay you interest, and it's not helping the economy. So they want you to take the money out of the bank and directly put it into the stock market or bond market, so that the companies would benefit from the savings that would that are just idling, sleeping in the bank. But that was so negative nominal interest rate, although very rare, have been used occasionally in some countries. But negative interest rate is actually like a fee, right? If you think about it, and you still it is. If you are, if you're a very wealthy person, if you're a very wealthy or wealthy corporate wealthy corporation, very wealthy corporation, or very wealthy organized crimes, wealthy organized crimes. If you think about it, if you're a very wealthy person, you would have offshore banking account, offshore banking, right? What is offshore banking? Everybody heard about Swiss banks, right? You all know what Swiss banks do, don't you? And who would have Swiss bank accounts? Huh? I mean, Swiss banks are keeping your money, but or your valuables, or important documents. In other words, they are basically renting the storage, a safe storage box. That's what Swiss bank is, and Swiss banks don't disclose their customers' information. In other words, privacy and strict secrecy and privacy. So who uses, that's why I said, very wealthy people, wealthy corporations, organized crimes, they all have Swiss bank accounts. And but they keep their gold, valuables, important documents, money in the Swiss banks to what? To evade tax, to evade taxes, right? And then for that service, they have to pay. You have to pay the Swiss bank. So that's a fee. Basically, nominal interest rate is like that. Okay, and Swiss banks are only one example of offshore banking. In generically, it is called offshore banking, and another offshore banking location is like Bahamas. Like what do they call it? Caribbean islands, right? Caribbean islands. There are a lot of paper companies. Why? Trying to evade, tax authorities of their countries. So negative nominal interest rate is commonly found, commonly practiced by Swiss banks or offshore banking centers. But if it is regular retail bank applying negative nominal interest rates, that's very rare, but it has been used in some countries, at certain times to discourage money idling, sleeping idly in the bank account. Okay, but most economies do not have negative nominal interest rate, but negative real interest rate is possible. Negative real interest rate is it's real possibility. And now let's think about, so then why? Now the benefit is the benefit is to the economy. So it's the same logic. Suppose you are keeping your money in the bank, right? It's paying you 5% interest rate, but the inflation is 10%. But you are effectively paying interest for lending money to the bank. So you're not going to keep your money in the bank, right? You would rather. So in other words, but then the benefit as lender, if you're the lender, negative real interest rate is not a good thing, right? Obviously, this is a bad news. But if you are the borrower, from the borrower's perspective, think about it. Negative real interest rate is a good news. If you're the borrower, you borrowed $10,000 last year, and 1 year later, you have to pay back $11,000, right? With 10% interest rate. But there has been 10% inflation, right? in over 1 year period, right? So you borrowed last year. Now now it's time to pay back. You're paying back $11,000, but it's just nominally $11,000. But in terms of real purchasing power of money, real purchasing power in terms of purchasing power, it is only worth $10,000, right? In other words, $11,000, nominally $11,000 can only buy as much as what 10,000 could buy last year. So from the borrower's perspective, this is like paying 0% interest, right? In other words, the burden is a lot lower. The burden is a lot lower. Does that make sense? The burden is a lot lower. And it's like almost using, if the interest rate, inflation was 10%, it's like using $10,000 at 0% for free. And if the interest rate is 5%, if the nominal rate was 5%, and the inflation was 10%, it's like you are paying less than what you owed, right? In real terms, you're paying less than what you owed. So in other words, you are, so you might say, so it's like, is it like, paying $9,500 back? It's close, but not exactly. To make it exact, you have to discount it by, so it's you're paying back 11K. But it's real value or real worth is you're not paying back 11K. In this case, 10.5K, because it's 5%. You're paying back 10.5K, but the inflation was 10%, so you divide it by 1.1, and what's it gonna give you? Just by using the calculator. So it's 10.5K, right, divided by 1.1. It's like paying back 9,000. Okay, 9.5455. It's like 9.545K, which is so it's like paying back $9,545, right, in real purchasing power, right? So yeah, that's how it works. So and why is it from the borrower's perspective, this is very important, because more people, if this is the case, the borrowing will go up. But we're out of time. And why is, if borrowing increases, why is it good for the economy? We will have to talk about this next time. Okay, we're out of time. Any questions so far? Any questions? Any questions?
I wanted to know, will we go over the test questions or?
Well, if you ask, a specific question, we don't have time to go over everything, but since you can review, I mean, as I said, the test is still visible. I mean, you cannot redo it. It's viewable. You can view it. You can and you can see the correct answers and incorrect answers. So you can go over it. It is still available. It's still visible until tomorrow. And if you have a specific question, you should review it. And if you don't, if you still have a question, if there are things that you don't understand, you can bring it to the Collaborate and you can ask. But we don't have time to go over the whole thing. Okay. All right, any other questions? If you don't have any further questions, then yeah, Tia, do you have a question?
No, I was gonna say thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, then have a great afternoon, and I will see you on Thursday. Okay? All righty.
Thank you,
All right.
Professor.
You're welcome, Alicia. You're welcome. Take care, everyone.
Have a good day,
Um,
Professor.
You too. You too. I'll stop sharing. You're welcome, Renisha. Stop sharing and stop recording and sign out.